Carlton King, the former Scotland Yard Special Branch and MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for Special Branch in a jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy Podcast, the show that shines a light on the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations. But actually, as regular viewers will know, and by the way, please, or listeners, please do subscribe, so you will be one. Will know, we actually maximize and look really in depth at what I call geopolitics. And I take the widest sense of geopolitics, the things that affect us in our day-to-day lives, sometimes we're not even aware of, how the powerful, and that's not just in government, that's also in companies, and actually in the media and social media and how we think, how they affect our lives. So what I wanted to do today is looking back again at last year. I wanted us to see where certain issues were. And because I've got my two super duper ladies on board today, what I wanted to do was basically to ask them what their feelings were about last year and their topics. And they've come up with several. So without further ado, I want to introduce again my ladies from our menage a trois, which of course is my actual podcast wife, Firgas Esack, and the usurper who's come in, the madam who's come in subsequently, who we take as our third person in our fantastic life. What did we call it before? I think we called it something like there's a new word for it, Fergs. You can come up with it. Anyway, Dr. Rachel Taylor. So, Fergs, just come in first with, what do they call it again? Trupling or something like that, was it?
A fruple, yeah. A fruple.
Fruple, that's great.
Fruple.
Right, in our three. Brilliant.
But we said, like, in fact, actually, a listener said, a long time ago, when I did an episode with you, and they said it was great because it was partly it matched your it mirrored your spy with equal parts Miss Moneypenny and M.
Brilliant, love it.
So you know, there you go, there you've got that. But I'm really glad that everyone did enjoy the Christmas episode. We got lots of really positive feedback for that. Again, just to remind the listeners, get me on LinkedIn because it's the easiest way, and I do reply. But anyway, I thought I did actually for a bit of a laugh, for a bit of a nostalgia, Carlton, because it's been a few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought I'd listen back to a few of our threesome episodes. And I thought, you know, maybe this year, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but seemingly I overuse the phrase playing devil's advocate.
Right.
Dr. Rachel on frequent occasions says, "This makes me so angry."
Yeah.
And Carlton always chips in and points out how far one single packet of chocolate biscuits will go to feed a family in the 1950s.
Oh, he does that all the time.
Absolutely.
I have a vision of Carlton's childhood. And
It's
yeah,
tough
you
up
know,
north.
yeah, the sharing of the chocolate biscuits. Yeah.
Exactly.
Arthur Bicky. That's the one.
Yeah, people in my household will not be surprised that the most popular phrase that I use on this podcast is, "This makes me so angry." They will not be surprised. They hear that often in this house.
Brilliant. So, ladies, what have you got for us, for the listeners today, in terms of what are we going to speak about?
Well, it might seem vague, it might seem generic, but it might seem like a multifaceted topic. It might seem like one umbrella. It might be something that means different things to different people. But we thought we'd explore January. I think when this podcast airs, it will be what's technically now known as Blue Monday, which is the third Monday of January, and has been dubbed the most depressing day of the year.
Yeah. Can I just cut in, Fergus, and also say this year I'm really lucky because Blue Monday is also the date of my birthday.
Yo! Happy birthday!
See, we all knew this, and we thought we thought she'd go at least 10 minutes before dropping this in, but
no. I'm
29 seconds, and she's got the plug in there. Dr. Rachel's birthday. If you'd like to wish Dr. Rachel a happy birthday, you are very, very welcome to do it in the comments. Contact her directly, or if you're that way inclined and want to rock up with balloons, do a little dance, wrap yourself in tinfoil, Dr. Rachel.
Exactly.
Little anecdote. Dr. Rachel's best birthday present apparently was a roll of tinfoil. So there you go.
There you go. Absolutely.
Every day's a sharing day.
I think the story's more boring than imagining what you can do with a roll of tinfoil.
Yeah, you better do because otherwise it's got a problem. Yeah.
It's does anyone follow that Instagram feed called Very British Problems? It's all about these sort of quirky little nuances that make us, in inverted commas, hilariously British. And so there's like the tinfoil versus the cling film debate. So like Christmas Day is like tinfoil's best day, and Boxing Day is like cling film's best day.
Yeah, you know all these little anecdotes, Ferg. I love it. I know nothing like that.
Me neither. It's a great life, isn't it? It's a great life.
But anyway, like, look, so Blue Monday's this thing. Now, look, it was started out by a travel company. Like, they kind of said, we're dubbing it the most depressing day, and therefore everyone needs to book their holidays and get over it, right? But actually,
follow the money.
Yeah, and so some people sort of, there is. I personally believe that Dr. Rachel, in her sort of, circling back to our elders' wisdom, would probably tell us that there probably is some truth in the third Monday of January having some depressing elements. I mean, it's funny. Do you remember that? Did you guys there's that poem, isn't there, that was sort of always rolled out at school? It was written in like the 1800s. It's by Sarah Coleridge, and it's I don't actually remember what it's actually called. I think it's called The Garden of Seasons or something. But the first line is, January brings the snow, makes our feet and fingers glow. You know that one? I can't, like, it's one of those. It's one of those sort of school poems.
Public school education. There you go. See.
Yeah. 11 minutes, 15 seconds, and he got that swipe in as well.
I had to.
Yeah,
you fell into
it. It, but I was also thinking it.
Yeah, exactly.
But is it in the landscape of tide and emotion and Christmas come down and all the rest of it, is it the most depressing day, Dr. Rachel?
It's certainly one of the most depressing times because we're still really suffering from lack of light, and our circadian rhythm really works on sunlight, daylight, and by this point we've got nothing to look forward to, because we've been in the depths of winter for quite some time. And most people have sort of from their behavior in December is we tend to do the here and now rather than think about what's going to go in the future. So people will have splurged and probably spent too much money, probably done too much indulgence in December, so that by the time sort of the latter days of January come, everybody is actually feeling the effects of that. So there is something extremely psychological about that. And to be completely honest, February for me, you know, there's nothing to look forward to in February. You know, and I think that we need to revert back to the calendar where actually the end of the year is the end of February. Then we have something to look forward to, and March is like the start of the new year. That to me would have such a psychological uplift that people would not feel as bad as they do. You know, we sort of cram everything into a week, which is extremely overwhelming and extremely depressing. So yeah, I think there's something very much to do with sort of the latter part of January. I think you get to sort of the middle of January and winter still feels like it's a very long slog, definitely.
Delve deeper, Dr. Rachel, on circadian rhythms, etc., please.
Yeah, so obviously a circadian rhythm, all human beings work on a 24-hour cycle, and part of the brain that is extremely connected to this, the hypothalamus. And I know none of you viewers listeners can see me, but I'm actually pointing to where it is in the brain. Which I do all the time when I talk about the brain.
Fantastic audio. Do you want to describe where it is?
Yeah, do that.
It's like where people generally describe where the third eye is in the middle of the forehead. You know, it's like deeper inside the brain. It's like a group of nuclei within the brain, which is extremely responsive to light. So it's very much connected to our visual cortex, to our eyes. And most of our hormonal rhythms actually are connected very much with the hypothalamus, and especially our sleep-wake cycle. So, you know, we respond really well to light, which is why generally in January we feel like hibernating, because there's not enough light, and most people don't actually get any natural daylight because they move from the house into the car into the office. They go from box to box to box. Not many people make the effort to get, you know, proper daylight. And when we don't get proper daylight, we don't have enough serotonin within our brain, which is a balancing hormone. You know, I'm going to say it now. It makes me really angry.
Yay!
There you go. Happy New Year, people. It makes me really angry when I read or hear serotonin being called the happy hormone, because it's so much more than that. It really keeps our homeostasis, how our bodies function every day, really in balance. So when we've not had enough daylight, then we tend to start feeling quite unwell, but not being able to put our finger on it. You know, it's like we just don't feel okay. And, you know, January is a really bad month for that, because, you know, everybody does the Christmas market. So they go out, they might get a bit of daylight, you know, during that. But who goes out in January? You know, who's encouraged to go out in January? You know, certainly we tend not to have the weather for it. And unless you understand and know that you need daylight to generate enough serotonin in your brain, then certainly you're not going to feel compelled to do it.
So there's two questions come with that, because my wife, says that she suffers from this idea that when she comes into this winter period, she doesn't feel 100%. As she does when she's outside of the winter period. So there's that angle I'd love you to go down. And then the other angle that I'd like you to go down, and Fergs, if you've got some, because you always have some witty knowledge that's coming through as well, which would be interesting. The other angle that I'd love you to go down is how is that different for different parts of the world? Obviously, taking into account that they may well have different eras. Because, I'll tell you what one thing, what I... and then please come in on it. I was on a course years and years back when I was basically went to Austria to teach. In those days, like 2000 or something like that. The new accession states were coming into the European Union. And what we did is the Austrians put together a situation whereby we would speak to those states from Eastern Europe coming in and give some sort of expertise on democratic policing. Okay, so that's what the idea was. Obviously, you had to be a language speaker in the German language, because they did it in German language. So I went there to do this, and there was a woman from the Swedish FBI, great lady, and this is the first 2 days we were there, and I noticed on day one she was looking at her watch. So we're in Austria, in Graz, if you know it. And she's looking at her watch, and she looked all perturbed looking at her watch. So I thought, oh, okay. So the next day, you get to know each other a little bit better. And I said, excuse me, but why are you looking at your watch so perturbed? And she said, well, I can't change it because I don't know whether it's 12 hours, but I'd like to have it on 24 hours. So in other words, she's got it from AM to PM, but she'd like to have it on 24 hours a day. I said, well, why is that bothering you so much? She said, well, because when I go home, it's going to be all dark in winter, or it's all light in summer. So I don't know what time it is. Now, when you kind of understand that she's living in a place, because she was in northern Finland, she was from that office up there. What she was basically saying is that all day long in winter, it's dark. Day and night is dark. And you just get a smallest sliver of what we'd call twilight. Smallest sliver. But other than that, it's all dark. And in winter, it's all light. So she's happy with the all light, but terrible in the all dark. And she's fearing that, because apparently she bought the watch in Austria, she's fearing that she wouldn't know what time it was when she woke up. So that's interesting, isn't it? How must they feel? And then I looked it up, and I saw they have the highest level of suicide. I thought, wow, clearly there's something to do with this. So Doc, if you could go through that.
But then go on. I was all I was going to add to that was in the landscape of, like, to Dr. Echel's earlier point about who goes out in January. Well, the Scandinavians, who have it much colder than us. I remember there was a parenting trend. There still is in Scandinavia, but there was a parenting trend that sort of migrated its way over to the UK and sort of divided mums massively. But it's a thing where Scandinavian mums, when the baby's still in, the kids are still in buggies, they put them out for the nap, but in the freezing cold, they just bundle them up and they put them outside. In the cold, and it was like for a little while there was a bit of a trend, so it's like all the fancy Hampstead mums were kind of jumping on it, and then every other mum was kind of it basically sort of divided the Daily Mail from the Guardian readers, right? But then you see things like Michael Mosley at the moment's got a podcast on BBC Sounds about the benefits of the cold weather, right? And
by the way, can I just ask you one thing? Why are we not on Sounds? Can listeners please write into the BBC and say, why are we not on Sounds? Ladies, we should be on Sounds, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I think so.
So we need to change this. Sorry, I jumped in, Fergs, but let's get this out.
No, go on.
We should be on Sounds. We should be on Sounds.
Absolutely. So all I was going to say, and we can expand on this in a minute once Dr. Rachel's made her point, but the gist of this podcast is it's all about the benefits of the cold, and to some of Britain there's probably an element of being slightly tone deaf to fuel poverty, I suppose. But because
I can't see it going down in Liverpool.
But because there are things like turn your thermostat down a couple of degrees and it's better for your circulation or whatever. Well, you see what I mean? But it is bracing yourself and having those cold swims and all the rest of it was something that got massively popular in the last couple of years, and I imagine will continue to do so. So just circling back to Dr. Rachel's original who goes out in January. Well, my question is, should we be going out in January?
Yeah, of course we should be going out in January. We should be going out every single day of the year. And this is the thing. If people are struggling with any aspect of well-being, it's like the really simple things need to be addressed. And one of those simple things is that we really need daylight, and as early in the morning as we possibly can get it, as soon as the sun's up. If we can get our dose of daylight first thing in the morning, we're really setting our system up to be in a better state of functioning than we would do otherwise. And just sort of answering some of, what Carlton was asking, people do suffer from seasonal affective disorder, and there's no definitive sort of underlying biological mechanism that has been found to trigger this. And also saying people can get it in any seasonal transition. It's not just going into winter. But winter affects more people in that we really do need daylight. We really do need to be outside. We need to be connected with nature more. And people will really feel that going from sort of autumn to winter to real deep winter. People will be affected by that more because of how we are living. It's a real thing. And we know that serotonin receptors behave differently in winter than they do in summer. So there's a bit of a supposition that it's because serotonin it's a bit of a fast and loose in the brain during the winter. It literally dissipates a lot more quickly than it does in the summer months. So we know that, so we need to balance that by actually spending more time in daylight rather than less time in daylight. But it's the whole sort of evolution of human beings is that we evolved around the equator. So our brain evolved having sort of, more or less an equilibrium of daylight. It's only when we sort of move and venture out. I'm really interested in you sort of mentioned the Scandinavian countries, in particular Finland. It's, year after year, it's up there as one of the happiest countries in the world, yet it also has the highest rates of suicide. So we have to take everything in balance. And if we haven't got natural daylight, rather than buying sad lamps, which are not full spectrum, which people are advised to do that, where it exposes you to light, get a plant growing lamp which really is full spectrum and expose yourself to that. If you're thinking, the weather is a little bit rubbish, they're not likely am venturing outside. Or the more hardy amongst us say there's no such thing as bad weather, you just dress badly for it, and then out comes all the branded outerwear. Get yourself one of the lamps that people use to grow plants, because that is full spectrum light and that will really help. And we have to understand the effects of the environment a lot more in our bodies and our brains than we do. When people feel unwell, they automatically think it must be an illness, or a disease, when often it's because we are not actually looking after our well-being in the right way. And winter's terrible for that. People sort of limp through February and oh God, it's March, when really we need to be really looking after ourselves so that we're well rested in sort of January, February, and then when March comes, we literally can leap into action, not think, oh, thank God I've made it through the winter. We should be ready for action, not sort of thinking that we need to go on holiday.
So the interesting point with that then,
lamp, by full spectrum plant lamp, do you mean one of those things that you might use to certain things?
Yeah. That's exactly. And they're a lot cheaper than branded sad lamps. They're a lot better and they're a lot cheaper.
So what's the geopolitics in it, Rachel?
I'm presuming you don't need to buy these on the dark web. I'm presuming that garden centres...
you can get them on eBay. Other large-scale distributors are also available. So, yeah. And I suppose the geopolitics in all of this is... if people are less connected with themselves and their bodies, and they're more inclined to, look at everything as a disease, or, I feel really depressed and fed up, there must be something mentally wrong with me. And it's no, you just need some sunshine, you just need some daylight. We're getting people sort of dependent on, having somebody else to fix them. And and your listeners will have heard me say often that the only magic pill a person has is themselves. There is nothing else. And only when we sort of eradicate, well, have you had enough daylight? How's your sleep patterns? What are you eating? Are you hydrated? What kind of people are you around? We should be asking those questions first before we actually, go down the route of trying to diagnose something. It's really interesting to me as a neuroscientist is that there's more and more brain function so-called disorders being in the sort of mainstream medias, and we know full well that pharmaceutical companies like to create problems that they can solve.
Great.
So there's the geopolitics
line.
right there.
Exactly. So two questions, one for you, Rachel, and one for Fergus. You see, one with the media and how these stories come into the media and how you then put them forward, Fergus, that then makes people dependent on the money. Because the geopolitics that I tend to see, to be fair, on practically every issue, I would suggest it's about following the money, particularly when it relates to the West. So that's the first bit for you, Fergus. How does the story come in the first place? And for you, Rachel, how is it that other people like you, I suppose they twin together, to be fair, don't get your story out that it's not the pill, it's not the vitamin, it's not the whatever, it's about you? So those are the two questions I have.
Well, I'm going to chuck in a question for you, Carlton, before I answer yours. If you look at the concept of Blue Monday, and framing in there all Dr. Rachel's points, within January as well, there's also, I think the 4th of January or something is like National Divorce Day or something, and then there's this whole concept of cuffing, like cuffing season. Do you know what cuffing is called?
No, please, cuffing.
Cuffing's where you don't want to be alone for Christmas, so maybe you make that relationship choice a little bit earlier than you might have otherwise made, so that you've got that.
You know all this stuff.
But anyway, but people uncuff in January as well. And then, there's the pressure of Valentine's Day and, whatever. Now, look, Carlton, the Samaritans would say, whilst there is actually, there is an uptick in suicide numbers in January in general, they wouldn't necessarily ring fence it or sort of put that date in the calendar, per se.
Okay.
But what they do say is that more people commit suicide on a Monday.
Right. Because they've got to go back to work.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe that is something to do with circadian rhythms or something. Maybe they're just, like who knows? Well, obviously, we're not being flippant about the serious issues of suicide, but but to me, it's funny, isn't it? Because like Blue Monday was obviously that very famous song by New Order as well, and there's an anecdote with there was an interview with Bernard Sumner in, I think, the NME or something years ago, and they said, why is there the line how does it feel, in there, which has quite often been sort of referenced in the landscape of feeling really bad, and he said that he put that song is about being asked repeatedly the same questions over and over by journalists.
Right. Okay.
So he wrote. So Blue Monday is basically about being badgered by journalists and asked the same ridiculous questions over and over again.
and we've dragged the deeper meaning out of it.
We dragged the deeper meaning out of it, and then this travel company came along and sort of branded it. So what I would say is, like, look, in our world, we, I know we kind of joke about PR school, but in our world, we sort of talk about media moments, and by that we mean things that are already there. Mm-hmm. So Valentine's Day or Father's Day or Mother's Day or Veganuary, let's say. Or
you like the Catholic Church then, Fergus?
Yeah, exactly.
PR is like the Catholic Church. What can we piggyback on?
Well, no, it's about being aware. It's about being aware. Now, look, I don't massively like the media moments style of PR, but it's one of those things where what you need to think about is what might your competitors, what might your clients' competitors be doing if they were going down that very vanilla sort of media moments kind of space. And also, you know, it is what we always say to clients is like, you know, is there an opportunity to own this? Do you want to walk away from this? Or, you know, is there a middle ground where you just want to sort of sail on by? I mean, like, for example, for Valentine's Day, lots of brands, you know, there's a real trend with brands trying to be, in inverted commas, conscious and sort of saying to people, you know, hey, would you like to opt out of this? Or, you know, maybe you don't, maybe you have a parent that's passed and, you know, maybe you don't want to celebrate Mother's Day or Father's Day, or maybe you actually just don't want to celebrate these moments anyway. Would you like to opt out of our barrage of internet marketing and you know and sort of consciously object, I suppose? But we were talking internally about whether or not that's worse.
Yeah.
And just doing it anyway, you know.
Yeah.
So the question, I mean, this brings me deeper. I mean, Rich, we need your answer on the other, but this brings me deeper now, because what you're basically saying is now the actual perspective that's given now by not only the newspapers, etc., but also people in your actual profession of PR is all about now and solely about now the moment. So when is there any real thought? When is there any real understanding? Put it this way, what is real in the game now?
Oh, that's a question, isn't it? Oh, that's a question. That is yeah. I mean, like, look, I know we're going to talk about New Year's resolutions in a bit, so I'm going to let Dr. Rachel kind of answer her side of the question.
Okay.
But just circling back to what I was saying about suicides, Carlton, do you know this? Right. One thing I do know, I don't know if crime goes up in January, or whether or not there's a peak time of year when crime is higher. But what I do know is that statistically, apparently, it's lower in June.
So acquisition crime, okay. Now, you've got a big problem with crime, and the biggest problem is, how do you record it? What does it mean? What are we calling crimes? So let me give you an example. The strongest example, indeed, that I could give you. When I joined obviously I was policing per se for the American before I came to Britain. So I'll just aim in on look to British law, because there's some American law that I could have spoken about. But let's look at the British law. And when I came into the Met doing general duty policing for the 2 years that I did it, one of the things that there wasn't in 1984 was you could not rape your wife. Not possible.
Yeah.
Right? Then the law changed to say you could, because conjugal rights were exactly that, conjugal rights. Now, so that related to, and what you've got to realise is all police do in any state, I don't care where it is, all they really do is they function towards looking at the things that are dictated to them as laws. Now, they've got a lot of discretion, which I think is a lot less now, but discretion element. So, example, there's a law that says, a bylaw that said that every hackney carriage must have a bale of hay in it. So that obviously comes from the old days when they were horses and you had to have a bale of hay in it. So theoretically, you could stop any black cab and say, where's your bale of hay, mate? You're committing an offence. Here's a fine, right? You have to go to court. Now, obviously, a judge would throw it out, or magistrate. But the point is that can be done because the law's never been repealed. So it's all about laws. That's what I'm saying. And it's all about what the particular individual, the officer or whomever is stopping it, what he or she wishes to put forward. Do they wish to see the crime? Is the crime something that is now something that's prevalent? Is it a crime that's something that people no longer look to? So, example, they used to have in the old days, importuning. You know, you are a gay man and you're going into a toilet, and you know there were police sent out to find these guys who might be doing that. Now that would be de rigueur. You know, it wouldn't be something you'd do. So it's so this is how the laws change and move around, and you can never really say what is and what isn't. So I put that caveat there because it depends what we're looking at for crime. So if you had a program on TV that said, I don't know, shoplifting is important right now, then a lot of people are going to start saying, oh, shoplifting's going on. Yeah. Whereas if you didn't have that, fewer people would say it. So what I'm trying to say to you is the figures for crime are actually quite difficult. Now, if you ask me anecdotally, do I think that there's more crime in January, February, whatever, I would say probably yes. If for no other reason than people who have less money or are living on the street or whatever need to do something to stay warm, need to grab something that they can, even if it's, you know, the let's say an alcoholic and they need no whiskey in their stomachs to keep warm, whatever. So I would argue anecdotally that's probably about right. And anecdotally, I would say that it's probably right that in June, when it's much easier to live outside, much easier to be carefree, much easier to not think about problems, that crime would be less. So anecdotally, I would say it probably is the case. Now, whether behind that are real factual points, that's something completely different.
I think it's also easier to commit crime in the darkness as well. So the darker months tend to have more crime because it is dark.
Well, just superb. Just when you say that, it's quite interesting. When I was in that Austrian program, we had officers from all over the place. We had, as I say, we were looking at the democratic policing. We had a Romanian guy there, a great guy, and they're all senior officers. And he basically said, in the dark, we can shoot people. I said, what?
Wow.
He said, oh, in the dark, in our laws, if we tell somebody to stop and they don't, we can shoot them. I said, well, how the hell's that? And then the French guy, this is a Romanian, the French guy who's from a gendarmerie, is a colonel in the gendarmerie, who was also, he said, yeah, well, we can shoot them in the gendarmerie if we tell them to stop and they don't stop, whatever. I said, what do you mean? What's this got to do with the dark? I said, oh, well, in the dark, we can't see what they're carrying. So you see, it's something that sounds crazy. Yeah. But when you look at it, but a police in France, so the gendarmerie are outside the cities and the police are in the city. The police, the police officer, you know, they can't shoot people because there's light, right? So even though it's dark, there's going to be lights there. Do you see what I mean? This is
kind of like the Oscar Pistorius defense, isn't it? Like,
exactly.
Either person, you can just shoot them.
Exactly. Yeah. It's crazy, but when you figure it through, you can see how somebody's made bad law by thinking it through, but then it doesn't really stand up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would argue it's bad law, but maybe they've had an officer killed at some stage back in 18 whenever, and they've said, right, okay, we need a law to prevent that. Boom. That's how bad law is.
I don't know if you know the answer to this, cousin, but I sort of you know, I know people kind of romanticize the whole sort of lamplighters and street lights and everything, but did that actually reduce crime, or did it push into...
Funnily enough, I did my on the new police. So that's, you know, in the 1880s, 1829, when the Metropolitan Police was formed, the new police, the new way of policing. And yes, you're absolutely right. You know, before then, both street runners, etc., had cutlasses and sidearms, so they were armed. And basically, the thing was, well, I need to be able to defend myself, you know, because stuff might be happening. But some of the argument to prevent that by 1829 was that in the Metropolitan Police District, there were lighting systems and people could see what was going on. The other fact is, of course, they didn't want the police. So in reality, no, it's true. It's just quite interesting because they didn't want the police. So what happened is the mercantile classes, so we're getting technical now, the mercantile classes wanted a police because, you know, they were being robbed. They're having the money's taken off the Gordon riots. People were wild, you know, women were drunk on gin, beating people up, stealing stuff, etc., etc. You know, so which is why the licensing laws came in. So only
the women were drunk on gin.
No, particular.
Men don't get drunk on gin.
No, men were drunk anyway, so that they accepted that. But the fact when the women get drunk, see, because they called them in those days the dangerous classes. When the women got drunk in the dangerous classes, then it's a problem. Gin basically costs nothing to make. Practically all of gin
Mother's
is
Ruin,
tax.
isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, Mother's Ruin. That's where it comes from. So it was all tax. So they tried to put tax on it, but people were making their own. And then, so what happened is they were all drunk, going around, knocking about, and children weren't getting looked after. And it's not because they like children, the ruling elite. It's just because they can be dangerous. So what happened is that the ruling elite had their own retinues of armed individuals, because everybody could carry a firearm if they wanted, but they were just expensive. So they had their own retinues of armed, I don't know, coachmen, whatever, which would protect them. The working class, who cared about them, and anyway, they solved their problems by fighting each other and stabbing each other, whatever. Nobody's really bothered about that. It was the mercantile class that was becoming more and more powerful, take empire into account, and they were saying, no, to be a proper society. And by the way, Adam Smith was the one who pushed it forward, because he was talking about what the Germans were doing and the French were doing, having a police system. He said a proper educated class, by that he means the ruling elite and the middle classes, need a system of policing that will support them. That way we become wealthier, right? Because the whole point is it's all about the money. So we become wealthier because these folk can't steal everything, these dangerous classes. So it all comes back, you see, to money and how we function. So you're absolutely right.
Isn't that a law like Godwin's law, Carlton, where it's, it always comes back to the money? Do we need to, shall we call it Carlton's law? because you're quite right, and just thinking, you sort of, why do people not take responsibility for themselves and for the health? Why do they look outside of themselves for help? It's because everybody has been conditioned to give up autonomy so that they can just very simply purchase an item, purchase a product, have a pill, have a tonic that's going to make them all better. And one of the reasons why I'm not popular is because I say to people, the only way that you can actually affect change and make yourself better is doing it yourself, being consistent and putting the work in. So that is why I'm not a millionaire, Carlton.
Rachel, this is superb, Rachel. I mean, and the problem is then we come back now to Fergus. Why does or can Rachel not get her perspective through via the media?
I am gonna come back to this, but I'm gonna just open this topic up to something else, which I found quite interesting and sits in the same space. Okay, so New Year's resolutions, right? Mm-hmm. You might find this quite interesting. I mean, like, we kind of all laughed last year because, well, we didn't laugh. We sort of, scraped our nails down the blackboard and, when Rishi Sunak kind of made all these sort of, pledges last year, didn't he? And he was basically just talking about, it was basically his New Year's resolutions, wasn't it? But he was like, we're going to bring down inflation. Well, that was going to come down anyway. Then we're going to, reduce the national debt. Well, yeah, marginally, that was probably going to happen anyway. Okay, well done. Two ticks in your little achievement box, Rishi. Well done. And we'll stop those small boats as well. And obviously we know where that's gotten us now. But it's interesting because in 2023. I mean, this data is according to Forbes, right? 2023, 19% of Brits made New Year's resolutions. Okay. Compared to 38% this year. Right. Now, I mean, obviously this is survey data, so I mean, we all know what the
coefficients, survey data.
Right? Mm. But what Dr. Rachel might be interested in is that the top ones are still the same. The top resolutions are still the same. Lose weight, exercise more, right? The third highest is to reduce stress. And the fourth one is to sort out finances, sort out money issues, right? Mm-hmm. Right down the bottom, I mean, quite literally, like, less than 4% is veganuary, dry January, giving up smoking, etc., etc. The majority, I mean, like, if you take out lose weight and exercise, which are very much the top ones, the biggest one that you wouldn't expect is to reduce stress. I think it's 41% of people who made New Year's resolutions said they want their resolution is to reduce
I
stress.
see where you're going. You're talking about it coming towards Rachel. Now, let me stop you for one reason. We're going to come straight back onto it because we're now 47 minutes and I'm going to use my, what do they call it, that hammer that judges have, to say... Gavel, thank you very much. To say this will be the end of episode 1. We will come back to you on episode 2 next week. So thank you very much, Rachel. We'll see you next week, which will be in a few minutes. And thank you very much, Fergus.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. Listen, guys, listen into the programme. Please don't forget, and you do this better than me, Fergus, talking about people subscribing. So can you just do it for me?
Oh, subscribe, because you're making him happy. Come on.
Yeah. You also need to
It's
give
one
us
click.
five-star
It's one click. It's one click. And Dr. Rachel can talk to you about the dopamine hit that you'll get as well. But just do it. Just do it. Don't think about it. Just do it. All right.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And we'll see you again, ladies and gentlemen, next week.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
More than a quarter of a century, I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.